Oh, hello, everybody. Buenos días. Welcome to this installment of GreenFaith Flash Training in Organizing Skills. I am Reverend Dr. Neddy Astudillo, Latinx and Latin America Organizing and Training Coordinator at GreenFaith. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Reverend Chelsea MacMillan, Climate Finance Organizer, about how to decide to risk bold action and nonviolent direct action for climate justice. I'm looking forward to this, Chelsea. Welcome.
Me too. Thanks, Nettie. And hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. Today we're going to talk about how to decide to take bold action as people faith in response to climate change. In the face of the climate emergency, we, especially those of us with social privilege, really need to be willing to take bold risks to push companies and governments to respond to the climate crisis.
Thank you, Chelsea. Well, can you say more about what you mean with bold action and about privilege and risk? When I think about risk, as an immigrant to the USA, I know that I need to think about my family and not doing things that may put my immigration status in jeopardy. Is that what you are talking about? How does this US experience may be similar from others in other parts of the world? Or what would you say to Latinas like me who want to be bold and take risks and work on climate justice?
Thank you for this great question, Nettie. It's a very big question, it's a very deep question, and it's really hard to answer in a simple way because everybody really needs to discern how they can take bold risk, and that can mean a lot of things. And I think that it's a bold risk for all of us to really go to these places of power and show up and really take space and show power in a way that is antithetical to what we think of as power, like showing up and demonstrating that we are communities who take care of each other, who take care of the world. That is power. That is powerful. And to bring those ideals into places of power in the way that we think of, like in society, I think is really changing the script. But I do think maybe what you're talking about, and sometimes we've been talking about this with GreenFaith, that like taking bold risk might mean doing something that means like risking arrest, like doing something where maybe you're blocking the doors to a big corporation, or you are standing in front of a pipeline and preventing that pipeline from being constructed, a pipeline that's in process, in construction, maybe standing or blocking that up in some way. And often these things lead to dealing with the state, with police or law enforcement, and leading to arrest. So first off is that like everyone has to make their own decision and like absolutely consider what these implications would be for their for their livelihood, for their kids. And I would personally never ask someone who isn't a U.S. citizen to even think about doing this kind of action. Um, but what I would encourage people to do, especially those of us who are maybe more comfortable in our lives, who maybe getting arrested wouldn't like wouldn't destroy our lives, to consider doing these things. Like what I come down to is like the climate crisis is not going to be convenient for anybody, and spending some time in jail for a day or two is like not a big risk for many of us. All of that being said, because you asked me like what would I say to someone like you who maybe like does not want to take that type of risk, is that we also need everybody. For every one person taking that type of bold risk, we need probably 5 or 6 others supporting, and working together, putting out the message, taking care of each other's kids, bringing food, making art, making music. That it really takes everyone. I really think that everyone has a place. And the last thing I'll say is that I think this is a way of being in solidarity with each other. I think that, I'll speak personally as a, person who's white, who um, is middle class, fairly comfortable. I'm working with a lot of people who kind of match my demographic, that we have to go into the places of power um, in solidarity with frontline communities who are every day um, facing very like other kinds of risks, like dramatic risks to their lives and their livelihoods and their families, in like very visceral ways. So in that way, I think we're all taking our place in this movement.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. So I see it echoes for me to know that every one bold action or definitely needs the support of many others around them to make that happen. So that's really good. That's and thank you for giving us some examples of bold actions itself. Um, and I think it's definitely, as you said, everybody has to consider how they can be involved in this risk taking, and I'm sure that there may be times in our lives that yeah, we have to risk everything because life is
Yeah.
it's really what's at stake. Anything else that you can think of that people need to think about when they want to consider deciding whether to do something bold? Anything else that may come to mind?
Well, there's something about what you just said that made me think about, when I think about nonviolent direct action, I think about MLK and the civil rights movement, and I think about Gandhi and the Salt March, and these were both, first of all, spiritually rooted movements, and these people were taking, like, they weren't just passive victims of the state. Like when there was the march on Selma, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they were doing it so that the world would see what was happening. Nonviolent direct action really is a way of making problems that are invisible visible to the rest of the world. And so I think we're all called upon to do that. And um, I think a lot of us have privilege, especially in dealing with the state and law enforcement. And I'll speak, for example, from some experiences here in New York City, which, like, we're really the belly of the beast, like finance and capital. We are a major hub for that here in New York City. And I've been part of actions with GreenFaith and with others, doing things like blocking the doors to BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, who are actively investing in fossil fuel companies that are building new pipelines and putting in more gas infrastructure, that are destroying people's homes and causing a lot of damage and harm, not only to the environment but to people in frontline communities. So I think it's really about, like, where can we put our, how can we be most strategic? So when we're thinking about the kind of bold risk that we can take, it's like, what's in our backyard? Who are the decision makers that are around us that we can go and demonstrate to, so like here in New York City, again, it's the finance industry. And I would say what happens here, just to give an example, if we're blocking the doors to BlackRock, we would get arrested. We've been arrested for a violation charge, which actually is only on the level of a speeding ticket. So it's not something that's going to destroy anybody's life or livelihood. It's something that that the implications of are actually pretty low. So just to give an example that it's not always as bad as we think it's going to be. but we all have to make our own decisions as to where, where can we push our comfort level at least a little bit, because the climate crisis is not comfortable. It's not convenient. It's something that's really asking us to step up in bolder ways than we've been asked to in
Mm.
our lives.
Great. Chelsea, and you are a faith leader as well. You're a woman of faith. Is there any spiritual practice or anything that you normally use to support yourself as you are taking bold actions? Anything that you have there to
I
support?
love that. I love that question. I want to know your answer to that too, Nettie. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is singing, both in action and outside of action. Um, just singing and bringing, connecting to breath and voice, is part of my practice. What about you?
Well, very good question. I feel that I feel it in my heart first, in my God. I feel that spirit calls me in ways that when I know when spirit is calling, and that's what empowers me and supports me to take the next step and take the action. So I followed spirit first, and then that supports me all along the way. Because when I'm in the moment of the actions as an introvert that I am too, and a Latina, from a different culture, etc., that's when all the doubts and all the thoughts and all those interruptions. But I just go back to what I know that I felt before, and I know that I'm doing what God called me to do. So
Yeah.
and of course, knowing that God is with us wherever we are, and this is the work of Christ in my case for my faith, that I'm just joining that work in the world. So yeah, so that's what I have as support. Thanks for asking me to.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add before we end, Chelsea?
I would just add that, I think that activism and taking action is part, for me at least, it's part of my spiritual practice. It's a practice in and of itself. It's living out our prayers. Um, it's praying with our, not only with our hearts but our hands and our feet as well. And so just holding that with me, and I feel honored to be able to do that with GreenFaith.
Mhm. Great. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Thank you so much for
Thanks, Nettie.
sharing what you do and who you are. Well, and thanks everyone for joining together for this installment of Green Faith Flash Training in Organizing Skills. Because the earth and all people are sacred and at risk, Green Faith is building a worldwide multi-faith climate and environmental movement. Together, our members create communities to transform ourselves, our spiritual institutions, and society to protect the planet and create a compassionate, loving, and just world. Together, we are doing. Many blessings. Thank you.
Thanks, Nettie.
Thank you, Chelsea.